5 seconds into this movie, I knew why One Battle After Another has been getting such overwhelming praise from the critics, and why it's getting all this award buzz, and why it's being called a masterpiece. When the first scene showed us a woman looking down at an immigrant detention center with disdain, I had a pretty good idea where this movie was heading, and I wasn't wrong. What I thought, based on the trailers and commercials, looked like a dramatic thriller with some offbeat, quirky comedy about an odd, paranoid guy living on the fringes of society looking for his daughter, is actually a movie about a bunch of terrorists in the US fighting against the system that's being run by some of the most cartoonishly racist characters I've ever seen in something calling itself a serious film. It was immediately obvious why they left a lot of the specifics of what One Battle After Another was really about out of those trailers and commercials entirely. Hoping that this story that romanticized literal terrorists and their network of like-minded anti-capitalist terrorist comrades could reel in a few more bucks at the theaters from unwitting viewers. And it was just as clear why the critics were all falling in line and hailing this movie as some sort of masterpiece. I was genuinely surprised at how viscerally unlikable every single character was in this movie, surpassed maybe only by my surprise that this movie was made by the same guy who directed There Will Be Blood. A solid cast and great acting performances were completely wasted on fundamentally unlikable characters. Great cinematography was wasted on a terrible story. And the movie's approach to tackling America's contemporary political issues was one of the most ham-fisted I've seen in years. I don't think I've disliked a movie this much since Amelia Perez.
Man to woman.
From penis to vagina.
And this one will probably get nominated for just as many awards too. And I'll talk more in detail about everything that makes One Battle After Another such a hate watch after I get in a recap of the film. So set your terror meter color wheel to red because we're joining the Revolucion and diving into spoiler territory. The movie begins by introducing us to Perfidia Beverly Hills and Ghetto Pat, two, quote, revolutionaries who, along with a bunch of other armed terrorists, collectively called the French 75, free a bunch of illegal immigrants from a detention center, leaving Colonel Stephen Lockjaw, the officer in charge of the facility, behind, locked within his own detention center. Perfidia and Pat continue their attacks with the French 75, bombing politicians, banks, and infrastructure, and stopping every 2 minutes to bang. Lockjaw, who we'll call Soldier Boy from now on, later catches up with Perfidia when she's in the middle of planting bombs at a bank, and he lets her carry on with it as long as she agrees to come meet him later to return his gun and his hat. She comes to his hotel room where she holds him at gunpoint before eating his asshole, and presumably carrying on with other sex acts. Fast forward a little bit, Perfidia is pregnant, and she has a kid with Ghetto Pat, but she's jealous of the attention Pat gives their baby daughter, and tired of being tied down by something as inconvenient as a family, so she abandons them. She goes back to her old tricks, and when holding up a bank with her comrade named Jungle Pussy, Perfidia kills a cop and gets arrested. While under arrest, Soldier Boy shows up to save her from justice and puts her into the witness protection program in exchange for her flipping on all her comrades. They all get swept up, and Pat and his baby Charlene are forced to assume new identities as Bob and Willa Ferguson before they flee. Then Soldier Boy brings a bouquet of flowers to Perfidia, only to find a note that reads, "This pussy don't pop for you," which she left behind before escaping to Mexico. 16 years later, baby Charlene, aka Willa, is all grown up and training karate with the Sicario sensei, and her dad, Ghetto Pat, aka Bob, is getting high before his parent-teacher conference. We then take a tour through a detention center featuring kids in cages, run by Soldier Boy, who accepts an invitation to meet with some government bigwigs. They're considering bringing him into their very exclusive group of elites, the Christmas Adventurers Club, a group of superior humans that are squarely opposed to revolutionary trash and dedicated to making the world safe and racially pure. This is something Soldier Boy wants desperately, and part of their due diligence on Soldier Boy's moral and physical fitness is to investigate how stringent he's been in his duty to racial purity. After a Sanctuary City underground radio operator gets brought in for questioning, Soldier Boy and his men find where Bob and Willa have been hiding, and they undertake an operation to bring them in. Willa is saved from the raids by her auntie, and they take off, while Bob flees his home right before they catch him. Bob meets up with the Sicario sensei as the city is thrown into chaos by police raids that are rounding up illegal immigrants. The sensei, who's running the underground railroad for illegals, has to get all the illegal immigrants out of his proverbial attic and into a church, while Bob tries to contact his old network of terrorists to find out where to rendezvous with them. They split up and Bob falls 40 feet onto concrete and is somehow perfectly fine. However, he gets arrested. But then, some friendly Mexican nurses bust him out of custody, and the Sicario sensei picks him up. Meanwhile, Willa has found refuge in a nunnery that's part of the resistance. A nunnery with an armory that would rival a small nation, and one that grows weed, because apparently nothing is sacred. Elsewhere, in an underground bunker, the Christmas Adventurers Club meets to discuss rumors that Soldier Boy has a mixed-race child, which leads to a discussion that can best be described as a wet dream fantasy for the kind of people who see racism around every corner, as the group discusses making the world pure and clean enough to eat off the floors. And they decide to send out one of their men to clean up the situation. Soldier Boy and his men raid the nunnery and take Willa captive, and Soldier Boy does a DNA test on Willa to see if she's his kid. While they wait for the results, Willa asks Soldier Boy why his shirt is so tight, which leads to him vociferously denying that he's gay. The results are in, and they have a message for Soldier Boy.
You are the father!
So now, Soldier Boy has to get rid of the evidence of his racial impurity. Meanwhile, Bob and the Sicario sensei get pulled over because the geniuses are chugging beers while driving toward a life-or-death rescue, and Bob flees and arrives in time to find Soldier Boy leaving with Willa. Bob wisely fires a high-powered rifle indiscriminately towards Soldier Boy, with his daughter only about 4 feet off his target. But luckily he misses everything, which leads to him chasing down Soldier Boy in a stolen car. Soldier Boy hands Willa off to a bounty hunter to deliver her to some white supremacists that will kill her for him, but the Native American bounty hunter comes to his racial senses and wises up to the cause as he frees Willa but dies in the act. Then the Christmas Adventurer's henchman finds Soldier Boy and blasts him in the face with a shotgun, causing his vehicle to fly off the road. Bob finds Soldier Boy dead in the wreck, but doesn't find Willa, so he gets back in his car and ends up in a three-way car chase with him chasing the white supremacist who's chasing Willa. Willa finds a way to kill the white supremacist, and Bob is reunited with Willa, the half-terrorist, half-white supremacist daughter of his ex-slam piece that he raised. But it turns out Soldier Boy somehow survived a shotgun blast to the face and a high-speed car wreck, and he gets accepted into the Christmas Adventurers Club just long enough to be shown into his new office where they gas him to death for his impurity. Bob shows Willa a letter her mother left behind that conveniently doesn't mention her terrorist past, and she hugs Bob, and this is supposed to be some kind of emotional moment, before Willa heads out to pick up the torch of terrorism herself, and the movie mercifully ends. Man, one battle after another was horrible right off the bat. It started off so horrible that it was hard to even get into. The only redeeming aspect that might keep you watching comes from a sense of morbid curiosity to watch this train wreck unfold over an excruciating 2.5 hours. Besides every character in this movie being an irredeemable shitbag, which I will get to in a minute, this movie throws some really grossly sexual shit at the audience right up front. While raiding the detention center at the beginning, Perfidia Beverly Hills forces Soldier Boy to get a boner at gunpoint before locking him up. Perfidia needs to get boned every 2 minutes she's on screen. Soldier Boy was jacking off in his truck while watching her commit acts of terrorism through binoculars, and when he met up with her later, us viewers were treated to her eating his asshole. Combine that with the tone-deaf nature with which this movie romanticized acts of terror, and how unlikable every character in this movie is, and one battle after another put on a clinic on how to turn people off. And that last point is my biggest takeaway from this movie. Every single major character was irredeemably unlikable, rotten to the core, and just straight up evil in some cases. Even the daughter Willa, who you could view as being an innocent person born into this fucked up life, chose the fucked up life at the end. These people were terrorists, they were thieves, and they were murderers, and if this movie had its druthers, it would hail them as heroes. At no point in the film did any of them even try and get on the road to redemption. They're unrepentant, horrible people, and the only way the film could even try and make people root for them was to make the bad guys even worse people. For anyone with any kind of moral character, these characters were just a representation of a race to the bottom. With every character involved being incredibly unlikable, it's impossible for normal people watching this movie to find anyone to root for or to sympathize with, so you lose interest in the story entirely. I don't care if this horrible guy finds his daughter. I don't care if any of these people succeed. Every character in this movie can go to hell for all I care. And that issue just kneecapped this movie's characters right from the get-go. You can act your socks off. The writing can develop a character from here to kingdom come, but if people don't like them or can't relate to them in the slightest, it's all for naught. And probably the worst part is the movie spent 2.5 hours trying everything to make us sympathize with these people. To romanticize the revolutionary and urban activism and just shrug off acts of terror as somewhat justified when you're not happy with the current political policies. The only thing that might have worked in showing the heroes in a better light was making the bad guys cartoonishly evil. Every single bad guy in this movie, to a man, was a white guy. Every person of color was portrayed as inherently good. Almost every single illegal immigrant was a woman or a small child. The bad guys weren't simply trying to enforce the law, they were on a mission of racial purity, rounding up, harming, and killing minorities, all in service of the system of white supremacy. These people literally built a nearly $200 million movie off the kind of childish, black and white worldview you'd find in a communism subreddit. And this movie's takes on the US's contemporary immigration issue was akin to what you'd find on that same subreddit. From kids in cages to the unsubtle usage of the term bad hombre, one battle after another was on a political mission. Even all the many militarized police raids on businesses employing illegal immigrants this movie featured were just a backdrop they chose to put the story against. It had no substantial bearing on the actual plot. This ham-fisted approach to throwing contemporary political issues into your movie and into people's faces is the exact thing people can't stand about present-day Hollywood. It's purposefully divisive, preachy, propagandistic, and even if it didn't ruin this movie now, it'll make it age like milk. And to top all of that off, the underlying story with this movie was terrible. We began with 45 minutes of backstory to try and make us care when the movie's actual story began. And when the actual story kicks off, it just covers a period of 36 hours where an alcoholic, drug-addicted former terrorist dad is trying and failing to get his daughter back from her actual father who's a white supremacist. Yeah, sign me up for that adventure. Don't be fooled by the chaotic or frenetic nature of the events in this movie. The story is weak and only surface deep. But it certainly makes sense now why the trailers didn't tell us what's really going on with this movie. And with such a bad story undergirding the movie, all of the directorial tricks the creators employed to spice things up just leave a bad taste in your mouth. A bad story spread across 2.5 hours makes it even worse. Shaky cinematography and tense music can't undo how boring the actual events we're watching are. There was a nearly 4-minute scene where 3 people were chasing each other in cars, with them just driving and glancing at their rear views in silence, all the while gaining no ground on each other. Only a psychopath thinks a scene like that needs to be nearly 4 minutes long. Whew! I really hated just about everything in this movie. It's a different story on Rotten Tomatoes, however, where the fans are still giving this beep, boop, masterpiece the same 85% it's been stuck at pretty much since the movie came out. And on Metacritic, it's getting roughly the same reception at an 8.2. One saving grace for society is that no one really showed up to watch this shit show, with the movie bringing in just $48 million globally its opening weekend. So, on a reported budget of $175 million, it basically has no shot at turning a profit, especially once word of what this movie's really about gets out. As for my rating, it goes without saying, but One Battle After Another is an absolute hate watch, and I think even ISIS has put out better films than this. Films that also, ironically, romanticize terror less than this one. I know nothing about the book Vineland that this movie was inspired by, other than the fact that this movie is extremely loosely based on it. But if it were anything like this movie, then I might be convinced to start supporting book burning. This movie sucked more than Dracula in a San Francisco rest stop bathroom. And I don't know why I haven't seen more talk about how bad this movie really is. Maybe no one outside the critics and me actually went to see it. Maybe people don't want to speak out about a movie that appears to be popular, but this movie sucked, and I think you should know about it. And on a serious note, the last thing the US needs right now is something romanticizing radicals who commit acts of violence against law enforcement. This terrible movie really couldn't have come at a more terrible time. Did you check out One Battle After Another? Did you expect a different kind of movie based off the trailers and commercials? How many awards do you think Hollywood will try and throw at this garbage? Let me know in the comments below. And remember to like the video if you liked it, and subscribe to Hatewatchers for reviews of other current shows and movies. Thank you for actually fighting the system with me today, and I'll catch you on the next one.